Welcome to the No Name Brand Podcast. My name is Sashka Hanarappel, actress, singer, dancer, turned brand marketing, sales, and advertising strategist who brands your soul. And each week I bring you an inspiring person or message to help you discover your underdog, turn up your leadership notches, challenge the status quo, because you're fast and furious with a powerful message to share with the world. Thank you for taking time out with me today, and without further ado, let's get our creative and wisdom juices flowing. Hello, everyone. So tell me, what happens when you fuse your intuition with transformation and martial arts? Sounds unconventional, right? Well, our next guest, like most of our listeners and myself, likes to do things a little different, as in not following whatever everyone else is doing. And we all know that when we go off the track, it leads us to adventures that we had no idea would happen. And when they do happen, oh boy, we're in for a treat, because we know there are going to be some major learning curves. And that's just what our next guest is going to share with us today. An MBA certified trainer and coach, a Shoshin Ryu martial arts teacher whose mission is to help people clear fear and pain so they can find and live in their joy on a consistent daily basis. Here she is, ladies and gentlemen, Jennifer Sutton.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here, and what a great welcome. I can't even imagine. You make my work sound even more fun than I thought it sounded, and it sounds fun to me. So
cool. That is so cool, man. It's so lovely to have you. Where are you in the world today?
Where am I in the world today? I am in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York. So that's about 6 hours outside of New York City.
Oh, okay. One day I will land up there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area. The Finger Lakes are stunning. It's just a really gorgeous place to be. So,
well, I'm sure that those from New York will be listening. With my hot towel. They're going to be coming soon. So tell us, Jennifer, how did you get into martial arts, or in particular, Shoshin Ryu martial arts? I mean, how many different kinds of arts are there in the world?
Well, that one's actually a really easy one. My whole life, I wanted to do martial arts. I remember being in elementary school and middle school and high school and wishing I could do it. And then somebody opened a studio down the street for me, and I still couldn't do it because I couldn't afford it. And I didn't know that you could go into a studio and say, hey, I don't have the money, but can I train anyway? You can do that in most places. Most people are there to teach. And if a student can afford it and is sincere about it, most people will still take them on. And I didn't know that. I was too afraid. So then college came, and I still couldn't do it because there wasn't anything in martial arts where I was. And then my first job out of college, I lived on a mountain, no martial arts there. So when I moved to Alaska, Anchorage, I was working at the university and putting my husband through school at the university. And we were both still pretty broke at that point. And we went to a international foods dinner just because we wanted to eat for free. And there was a demo. It was a demo of Shoshin. And the other thing that happened to me during all that time was I lost most of my hearing when I was in Liberia, West Africa. And so I'd go to these events and I wouldn't hear most of what was happening. I would just smile a lot and enjoy the food and clap and that kind of thing. But when the martial arts people got up there and my sensei, Steve, got up and started announcing, I could hear clear as a bell his voice.
Wow.
And he said that Shoshin is about how not to be hurt, how not to hurt, and how to be responsible for your own happiness and your own harmony. And lightning struck, and I knew that was where I needed to be. So that's how I got into martial arts. How I almost got out of martial arts was that it was really hard.
Oh, well, you know, if it were easy, everyone would be doing it. If it were easy, everyone would be doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. But now tell me, that's pretty interesting that how the time frame between Liberia, Africa, and when you got into martial arts, tell us about that. And also, how did you lose your hearing and how old were you then?
I was 20 years old when I went to Liberia, and I was 25 when I started martial arts. So I was a junior in college when I went to Liberia. I went for a semester abroad, and they're not sure what actually caused the hearing loss. I had quite an adventure for 4 months in Liberia where multiple things could have caused hearing loss. So
Goodness.
yeah, I was in a major car accident, and that could have damaged the inner ear nerves, the connection between the brain and the inner ear nerves. I had malaria, and that's pretty common, but with the fevers, you could get to a temperature where it disturbed the inner ear nerves or destroy. And then I also had a medicine that gave me an adverse reaction. So that could have done it as well when I had an infection. And then the other thing that is probably actually the most likely is that I was on a prophylactic for malaria, trying not to get malaria. And that one causes inner ear nerve damage in a certain percentage of people.
What?
Yeah, if you take it long enough and in the right, or even in the right way, it can still do that. A certain number of people have that response. And I didn't know that. And then, of course, you take that same medicine in much higher doses when you get malaria to knock it back. So I had it as a prophylactics, and then I also had it as treatment. So it could have been any of those things. My time between Liberia and when I started martial arts was finishing college and then having my first job in California. I worked as a environmental science teacher out in the woods, or not really much woods where I was, but different ecosystems than that, but on a mountain in Southern California for LA County Outdoor Science School. So that was my first formal teaching job. I'd had lots of teaching jobs before that, but that was my first formal actually paid one. So that was kind of nifty.
So you started off as a teacher?
Right out of college, I started as a teacher. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Science, teaching science?
Yeah, teaching science to 5th and 6th grade kids out in the woods. And some of these kids were inner city LA kids who'd never seen the woods, who'd never seen dirt, who'd only seen city streets. So they were just, a lot of them were terrified just to be up at our camp because they didn't have any experience with that atmosphere, that ecosystem, that just the whole thing was completely like another world to them. So it was really fun to not just teach science, but to teach wonder and to have them see what other things existed in the inner city.
And were you teaching with sign language then, or how were you teaching then?
Well, you know, the real miracle is I didn't get hearing aids until 1996, and I went to Liberia in 1989. Mm-hmm. So for a long time, I just made it work. And
dang, Jennifer.
Yeah, jeez. And what's interesting is I could hear the whispers easier than I could hear actual voices. Wow. So when kids were trying to get away with things, I could hear that better than I could hear their actual answers.
How interesting is that? So, wow.
Yeah. When you're the teacher, you get to do more of the talking.
That's also true. Yes.
Or nature does most of the talking. They go off on their own and do their experiments, inquiries, and things like that. So it was okay. And I don't know, it worked out.
Now, why fall in love with martial arts? Why were you hooked, line, and sinker?
Yeah, when I came back to martial arts, I fell back in love with it, and I never, ever intended to teach it. That was never my goal. I always just thought I'd be a member of a dojo supporting other people teaching it. And I love to do that. I love to help people learn the techniques, but a sensei has a lot of responsibility, and I didn't really want to have that. I'll be honest. I like to go away on trips. I like to, not be there every single class and from the beginning to the end and from before the beginning to after the end. And you know what I mean? I was dedicated, but I wasn't quite sensei dedicated. And I moved out of Alaska back to California and then to New York, and there was no Shoshin dojo anywhere. And I tried other arts and none of them fit. I tried many other arts. I went to other people's dojos and tried to get the same juice out of the art, and I just couldn't get there. So I ended up, and part of it is because in Shoshin, we have a very explicit mindfulness and spirituality and personal development training that goes along with it. It's not just here are the moves and practice the moves. It's a very explicit way of bringing mind, body, and soul together. And I really like that approach. So I miss that when I go to other dojos, when we don't meditate before class, when we don't hear our kokoro teaching, our heart teachings. When we don't have that, I miss that. And to me, it's all one. And so I was trying to still avoid teaching And finally in a meditation, and then also in a guidance session that I received, I've been told multiple times that that's my highest and best gift. And so I have been doing my best to give that gift since then. So
that's amazing. And when did you start then with What If Wellness? When did you start becoming a coach?
I started doing that back 2007, 2008, I think, somewhere around there.
Oh,
Originally, I learned about EFT, which is my main modality, back in around 2001, I think, because I was trying to cure my son's ear infections, because I hated giving him antibiotic after antibiotic after antibiotic. But that's what we ended up doing because I couldn't find anything that worked for him. So I started with Reiki, but Reiki is great and works for lots of people, but I have too much of an energetic personality.
Oh, then it's got no chance with me. This is good to know. Good to know, Jennifer.
Yeah, it makes me fall asleep. So
like Red Bull. If I drink Red Bull, it puts me to sleep. I'm like, what?
We must have very similar bodies.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I just kept looking. And when I think it was actually my stepmother who pointed out EFT on a natural practitioner's website and said, you should check this out. And so I did. And it was too late by then to help my son with his ear infections. He was older and he was through that. So this was over years doing this because I was also working a business. That's when I was doing grant writing full time and wife and mother. And you know how all that goes, right?
I know how that all goes. Oh, yeah. Raise your hands.
Exactly. So I was doing that on the side, trying to find out where I wanted to go with that. And I wasn't looking to become a professional at any of these things. I just was looking for solutions at the time. And I found EFT and I tried it and I thought, wow, this sounds too good to be true. So I kept asking for volunteers, just asking for anybody to let me work with them. And every time it had an amazing result. And I thought, are you lying to me? I actually asked them that.
Tell me the truth. Tell me
exactly. Are you just trying to be nice? And they said no, people I didn't know. It was friends of friends coming to me. So it wasn't people that, wanted to keep me in their circle and didn't want to hurt my feelings. It was people who wanted to be healed and who were trying a new modality because they were desperate. And we had fantastic results. So I continued with training and with practicing and read millions of case studies and just started doing it. And it works great. So that's how I ended up in EFT. And then I added the infinite possibilities to it. And at that training, I also learned about fast brain training. Mm-hmm. And now I use fast brain techniques in my EFT. And that, I think, is what really shifts things really fast. And it makes it more fun because the what if questions, where what if wellness comes from, is coming sideways at things. So if you have a belief that you could never teach martial arts, for instance.
Well, this worked on Jennifer before the what if happened.
Yeah. You can then say, what if I could teach martial arts? What if I could be a great sensei? What if I have what it takes? I wonder what my life would look like. And so that you ask those questions while you're tapping the point so that it's clearing any disbelief, any resistance to it, and then tapping in the truth of it. So it's a really powerful, I think, blend of doing the EFT with the brain training. And then, of course, I use the traditional things like visualization and naming it and things like that make it fun and funny, because when people visualize things, they get some very interesting images.
Yeah. That's the way my brain works. When I speak to somebody, I see the whole conversation visually. And it's like I was listening to an interview once with, I think it was Lady Gaga, Pink, and Pharrell Williams. And it's how they see music, and they don't see music as notes. I can't remember who was who, but they saw music as shapes, as color, and as geometry. That's how they see music. So it's always interesting, like you were saying, so putting all the things visually. But what I wanted to ask is the brain training also something like affirmations? Because affirmations, like, I am great, and affirmations, you're asking a question without actually wanting the answer, but it answers it by itself, like, why am I so great? Is it something?
Exactly. It's more like the second one, because it's activating the fast brain, which is the part of the brain that feeds us everything processing to our decision-making brain.
Oh,
And
wow.
if we don't ask new questions, then our brain will keep giving us what we expect because it's what it's given us and we're still alive. And its main goal is to keep us alive. So if the information it's been feeding us all along has kept us here, fantastic. It's just going to keep giving us that until we tell it something else. But you can't just tell it directly, because if you say, I am great, all of a sudden, and your fast brain hasn't been feeding truth of that to you, then it can't shift to that. It'll resist it and it'll find all of the opposite. So then you say, what if I'm great? And your brain says, oh, I'm supposed to look for new information. And it starts looking for new proof that that's true. And that's what's so cool about our fast brains, is that it just wants to keep proving to you what you believe. So you change your belief and it changes what it proves to you.
So if I'm asking myself, what if I'm so great? I love this question. What if I'm so great? And your brain starts going, hang on a moment, Sashka, we need to find some answers over here. We need to find the proof. But they can't find the proof. What's happening there? What happens if it can't find the proof?
Your brain can find the proof.
Oh.
That is the amazing thing. You'll start seeing that littler things start being so great. Like, okay, so say that you aren't already as great as you are because you are already pretty great and you're going to be able to find easy things. But imagine you're just starting out and you don't know what makes you so great. All of a sudden, maybe when you're tying your shoelace, you'll feel something that makes you feel great about that. The texture of it, and your whole body will suddenly just have this peace, or this wow, I'm pretty great at tying my shoelaces.
I love that.
Something really simple, and then you start building on that. Then you have the emotion to match that thought, and then your body starts finding that emotion in other places, and then starts matching it with I am so great.
How cool is that? I mean, it's so simple,
cool.
But it's so cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that.
Yeah.
Now tell me, what moves you to your core that you want to shout out to the world to join your revolution of transformation?
I think the biggest thing is just trust everything that's happening to you. Trust that there's something good in it, even if it feels like absolutely not. Trust that there's something that makes you so great.
I am so great. Actually,
yeah.
You know what's funny is whenever I sign up for something, I always write, they ask you the name, and I always go Sashka the Great. And everyone laughs, but Sashka is a derivative of the word Alexandra, or Alexander the Great.
Ah! Well, it makes perfect sense.
I've got to dig into that information. What if I'm so great?
That's perfect. I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think that's pretty cool. So yes, trust. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Trust that everything that you're going through will make your life even better than it has ever been before. And then when you start asking the right questions, you'll start seeing that, and your brain and body will prove it to you.
I love that. That moves you to your core. That's like, yes, I'm trusting you. You can do this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that.
The thing that usually stops us from trusting is fear or pain or anger. And that's why my mission is to clear those things so that people can trust life, so that people can find their joy.
Yeah. Why do you choose to always walk or run the beaten track? Why not just follow the crowd?
Oh. Mostly because I've never known how to follow the crowd. You know, my sister and I are complete opposites, and she is what my dad always called somebody who understands the establishment. And when I got married, my dad said, "You finally joined the establishment."
Thanks, Dad.
And then I got divorced. But
Dad must have gone, great, she's out of the establishment now.
Yeah, so I think it's mostly just that I don't know how. I think it's never felt like me to do that. So I only know how to keep doing what feels like me.
What happens when you follow? What happens when you follow the crowd? What happens to you? How do you feel about it? How does your body react? How does everything in you react?
Everything gets awkward. My body gets awkward. And I start wondering, okay, did I match my clothes right? Is this how I should look at this function? Do people wear this kind of shoe with this kind of pant?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can look professional in Jen's professional way, but I always wonder, is this how other people do it? And I really don't have any idea if it's the right way. So I guess that's what happens is I question myself if I try and do it their way.
Yeah, it just feels awkward. Where do you feel we tend to block our transformation most? We all have a starting point. Somewhere along the line, we always have a starting point. Where do you feel we tend to hesitate to take that first step forward? And how would you suggest we conquer that block or the blocks?
I think one of the biggest thing is fear of success because, I think that fear of failure isn't such a big thing. And again, brain study shows this because fear of failure is safe or failure is safe because you say stay in the same social structure, you say stay in the same family structure, your friendships don't change. But with success, all of that could change. It might not, but it could change. And that your brain and your body try and keep you safe from that. So for me, the easiest way is just asking the what if success was safe is the first question. Because first your brain has to feel safe. If it doesn't feel safe, it can't let you do things because its job is to keep you safe. And it's very serious about its job. And it'll lock you down if it thinks that you're not going to trust that it's keeping you safe. When you try and lead your brain, sometimes it gets a little cranky. Asking, what if this is safe? What if I could have fun? What if this is the perfect thing for me? How would it look if and then choose whatever the other side of the transformation is for you. Fill in your own blanks about that. And just asking those what if and how would I questions. And then I always recommend tapping along with that. That's a little harder to teach here on the audio, but you can find online so easily just EFT and put whatever your issue is, or even EFT and the fear of success. I'm sure there's a tap along video online about that. I haven't looked for it, but I'm sure it's there. I think that's probably pretty key.
I love that. For those listeners that have not heard of EFT or tapping, or might have just maybe seen it and a little bit skeptical about it, what is it that we're physically tapping and emotionally tapping?
Well, you're tapping the energy points, the meridians that are flowing through your body or flowing actually just outside of your physical body. They're the meridian endpoints is where not just endpoints, but anyway, meridian points throughout your body. And they're the ones that you use for EFT are what's called a basic recipe. Instead of having a specific diagnosis like acupuncture uses the same energy point, but it uses them a little differently. An acupuncturist will identify what your issue is, and then they'll know exactly which point fits that issue. With EFT, you do a basic recipe and hit all the meridians. So the other cool thing about EFT is that it addresses the issue you're working on, but sometimes you have additional benefit. Because you're tapping a basic recipe, you're tapping all the meridians, you might be hitting something else that might be bothering you. So a few weeks ago, I was tapping on an emotional thing, something that I've had my whole life that I didn't realize that I had. And it came up in conversation one day and I thought, wow, that's really weird. I didn't realize I did that. And it was a fear. And so I was tapping on that fear. And after that tapping, and I think it was like about 40 minutes while I was driving, you should never tap while driving. But
Jennifer, do not recommend this. This is not something to recommend. No.
But I do it all the time. And while I was driving home, I was tapping. And when I got home and got out of the car, my feet didn't hurt. I've been having trouble with plantar fasciitis in both of my heels. I was fine. I got up and kind of danced and it felt great. So I was working on a completely different issue, but something else in my body that needed to be cleared was cleared. I felt pretty lucky about that because it felt great to not have the pain in my heels and also think that I was feeling better about the other issues. So
that's pretty interesting for someone with high energy. So it works pretty fast.
It works really fast.
How did your transformation in your life and business happen?
Well, I started doing more of the tapping and the self-development work more around 2009 when my marriage was starting to not do so well. And I was trying to find my own joy and my own center no matter what was happening with the two of us, because I didn't want somebody to blame for my sadness or my anger. I wanted to be, as Shoshin says, responsible for my happiness and my harmony. And I also don't believe that I can be hurt by others. Another Shoshin training, how not to be hurt, right? And it doesn't
That's
just mean,
huge. Sorry.
it doesn't just mean on the physical scale, it means on the emotional scale as well. And that's how I've used it more. For years, I didn't train Shosha, and I came back to it about this time. So I was doing it to clear my own, I'm not good enough as I'm breaking up with him. He actually ended up leaving me. We were both amenable to the idea, but he ended up moving to Brooklyn. He got a great job and moved to Brooklyn. But still, I felt like, okay, I'm not good enough for him. Obviously, it didn't work out, so I'm not good enough for him. And that was my core issue for most of my life, is I'm not good enough. Wow. So using EFT and then just the other mindfulness and training Shosha and all of those things brought me back to who I really am, and that, yeah, I'm good enough. And then sometimes I'm pretty great.
What if I am just so awesomely good enough? I love that. I love that.
Yeah. And I never would have been able to be on this interview 7 years ago. I would have thought, oh my gosh, there's no way I would have had anything to say or know how to respond or anything like that.
But more, why did you decide, you know what, I'm going to start my own business?
Well, I've had my own business since 1998 doing grant writing, supporting nonprofits and for-profits by writing grants to bring them money. And that was, good. And I had, it was one of those things that just flies out of my fingers. It used to be really easy to do. And then during the divorce, I got a full-time regular position, a nonprofit in town. And I liked that, but I knew that I wanted to be doing the EFT more full-time. And I couldn't imagine any place hiring an EFT practitioner full-time. Because nobody knew what it was. So why would they pay somebody a full salary to come in and teach EFT for them? That's shifting now. So I think that actually there might be a potential of that in the future. But I actually did it just because there was no job that could have me do what I'm meant to do. So I kind of had to go it alone.
Hit the road, Jack. Don't come back no more. Oh my goodness. I have another 3 questions for you, and 2 of the questions I ask all my guests nearing the end of the show. But before we get on to that, what's the most regretful thing in your life?
The most what thing?
Regretful. What do you most regret? Or is there anything you regret?
Well, I don't have a lot of things that I regret. I was told fairly recently that somebody holds me responsible for something that I didn't think I was responsible for. So I guess I regret that experience and how it turned out for her. I don't want to go into it here.
No need to.
for her sake. But that really surprised me. I was absolutely dumbfounded. And so I looked more at that situation and I think, gosh, maybe I had a role in that and I do regret that. So that's probably one of them because it turned into a fairly significant life experience for her for the long term.
Yeah.
So I feel I regret that either we don't understand each other better or that I made the choices she thinks I made. And it was so long ago that I can't tell you if I did or not.
Isn't it amazing what we carry with ourselves? The burden that we put on ourselves and carry with us. And just, that's amazing. Wow. And then still have the tools to go, I'm sorry about that. And to know it's not my thing, but someone else's thing. But to still to help them and assist them in the whole process as well, if they're wanting to. So that's pretty amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
Good for you, Jennifer. So I would love to know, as well as the listeners, how do you want to change the world or challenge the world doing what you do?
Change the world or challenge the world? Well, the top of my mission, the very tippy top that I don't always talk about, is that the reason why I want people to be able to clear their fears and live in their joy is because you can't connect in compassion to people until you're out of your own fear and anger.
Wow, goosebumps.
Yeah, and my biggest goal is that we see each other and that we connect to each other more deeply and see each other as human. No matter what the exterior or interior looks like, there's still a human in their own struggle. And I think that if we had more compassion and more kindness on a deeper level, the world would shift pretty quickly.
Yeah, I love
so that's been my big goal. And I don't always talk about that because I introduced myself to a class that way once.
And then what happened?
And they're like, we're just here to learn about stress relief.
Well, but, it's an inspiration. It's an inspiration, Jenna, because a lot of people might have been sitting. I mean, if I was sitting in the room, I would have been like, damn, I want to be friends with that woman because she knows where the hell she's going. I want to be part of that crowd. And like you said in the beginning, so many of us fear the success, so we'll just stay in our failure. So we just stay in our, my phone was ringing. Yeah, so we just prefer to stay in our failure section. But yeah. So I have 3 core values, and I'd love your take on them by filling in the blank. Creativity for you is?
Creativity, which is also a cool activity. Creativity for me is doing things how I really am. So it doesn't matter what the activity is. I'm being creative as long as I'm being who I really am.
I love that. Passion for you is?
Actually living who I really am. Not falling back into my own fears and my own limitations. I talk good, but sometimes. Okay, a lot of the times I have my own fears as well. And I have to go back into my own teachings and my own trainings to find my own passion. So living that every day is my passion, I guess, is what passion is.
Wisdom for you is?
I guess wisdom, again, it all goes back to who you really are. So wisdom for me is hearing my highest guidance without the fear.
Ooh, goosebumps. Love that one. Love that. Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us here today and sharing your story about the Shoshin Ryu, the martial arts, just about your passion and your transformation and your life, and for finding the truth yourself and trusting yourself as well to move forward and help others in their transformation, and for being a shining light. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
No, thank you so much. I've had a great time.
Awesome. And you can find out more about Jennifer in the show notes. We'll try and find that link for you about the EFT, the tapping. Maybe Jennifer will help us with that one. And you can find out more about her on a website, get in contact with her, social media handles, favorite book, favorite quote, all in the show notes. Thank you so much for being with us here today, everybody. And we'll see you next week with our next guest. Thank you. Bye-bye. Dang, that was just supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. I enjoyed having you on board, and please do me and you a favor. Head on over to iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. Click subscribe, and a super bonus, leave your review and you stand a chance of being announced and advertised on the show. I'm always striving to ensure that your brand is uplifted and empowered. Remember, done is better than perfect. So be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and send in your feedback too. You're the absolute best. Keep rocking.